one important difference between Mormon theology and doctrine and biblical Christian doctrine is the idea of the fall. The fall, by that we mean what happened in the Garden of Eden when humanity chose to disobey God and it took the fruit, as it's described in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. And so let's talk about the differences between the LDS and the traditional Christian view so we can kind of help people sort out where they're going and what the consequences are, why that matters. So let's start by reviewing a little bit about the LDS concept of Eden. What was it like?
Yeah, so in LDS view, the Garden of Eden was a beautiful place. It was pristine. It was paradise. But people did not have the ability to progress, and so they couldn't reach their full potential that God had planned for them.
Okay, that's so different from the biblical idea because Eden, there was nothing flawed about it, nothing incomplete about it at all. And so let's talk about Eve's choice. God said, "Don't eat the fruit of this tree," and whatever that signifies or symbolizes, it was a decision that God told Eve not to do. Well, what happened in the LDS view? What happened with that, and what are kind of how do they view that act of disobedience on Eve's part?
Yeah, so in the LDS theology, they believe that God did tell Eve not to eat of the fruit. However, he required it in order for them to progress, in order for them to have children and go on to reach celestial glory, that they had to. So it seems a little strange and almost contradictory, that God would tell them, don't eat it. But then he's thinking, do eat it, you have to.
Right. Yeah, because in Genesis 1, God said, be fruitful, multiply. He told him to have kids, to have family. And then in Genesis 2, he says, don't do this fruit, whatever that is, that's going to allow you to have a family. And so God set Eve up in a position where she had to be disobedient in order to be obedient.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of strange.
Okay. And I think that's why a lot of LDS people revere Eve, because they feel like that was a courageous act that allowed humanity to go on and be everything that it was supposed to be.
Yeah, they believe that was a part of God's plan all along. And so by Eve taking it, she really fulfilled God's plan. And it was something courageous that she has done.
So, but by contrast to that, then, how does the Bible look at Eve's act of disobedience?
So really, in the Bible, when you read, it's very apparent that God told her not to eat the fruit because she wasn't supposed to. It was not a part of his plan for us, that he wanted to be in that perfect relationship with us. By Eve taking that fruit, she introduced sin into the world. It really caused the brokenness that we experience today. It's so apparent that aftershock of her choice.
Yeah, by far. And you just look around, it doesn't take very far to see violence and people, hostility and just addiction and brokenness in every form.
It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, and the Bible even goes so far as to say that as a result of that, death entered into the world.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty serious consequence.
Exactly.
It wasn't an act to be celebrated. It's a catastrophe, really.
Exactly.
That they walked away from God
Absolutely.
in that way. Now, how does that affect us? Because the second article of faith says that the Mormons say that every human being will be punished for our own sin and not for Adam's transgression. And so in what way does Adam's or Eve's transgression, they're really in it together, in what way does that affect us today individually?
Really, it severs our relationship with God. And thankfully, even back then, God set into motion this plan for us, that he didn't just abandon us and say, I'm done. Yeah. He still loved us. And so he told us that I'm going to have a Redeemer come through your line, Eve, and he will, save the world. And so through Jesus Christ, that relationship is mended. Thankfully, he went to the cross. He bore our sin for us. And so now we are made right with God.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that you point that out, because in the very beginning, right in Genesis chapter 3, when this whole thing is happening, God gives a prophecy of redemption, even in the middle of this shame and this guilt and judgment. He gives this prophecy saying that one day the woman's descendant would become, the Savior of the world, and that's Jesus. Absolutely. And God's been at work ever since, and He's inviting human beings to know Him and to be reconciled to Him as the remedy for human sin.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you that, as you're thinking about now this new biblical theology that you're assimilating in your journey, that really the fall is catastrophic. And until we really understand how fallen we are and the nature of that sin, that sinful nature that we all inherited, it's really hard to understand the magnitude and the scope of God's grace for us. So I encourage you to ponder that, think about it, and talk about it with somebody. You can see the link below you that will take you to the discussion questions for this topic, and I hope you will have an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody about this today. God bless. Have a wonderful day.